everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is going over such an adorable little bag. I am so excited to share this with you guys today. Today's tutorial is for the double clutch bag from Spencer Og. This pouch is so stinking cute. Oh my goodness. So we've got two little compartments here, and you can see they're kind of attached in the middle, somewhat magically. I'll talk about that in just a moment. And then we have two zippers up top. We open one compartment, and we have little card slot pockets on the inside. If we open the other compartment, we have a little zip pocket on the inside. You have this beautiful design you can play with on the front panel, and this is what I'm like probably not most, well maybe. I'm very, very excited to share with you guys this panel here. I love what Diane did. She gave you the opportunity to get really artistic or not with this design panel on the front. So this can actually take you a lot of time, or you can just completely skip it and just make a basic pouch. When we turn it around on the back, we have this beautiful little wrist strap so you can put your hand in it, carry it just like that. You can see on my version, I actually made the crossbody strap for this. There are three different options. There's a slim crossbody strap, which is what I made and what I'm gonna be showing you today. There's a wristlet version, which is just pretty much something like this, but just with one tab. And then there's like a guitar strap version, which looks so cool. I wish I could show you how to do that one today, but unfortunately I don't have the hardware for the strap, but I plan on getting some and sharing that on my Instagram. So make sure you check me out over there. This version I made with foam, so it's nice and soft and cushiony, which I really like. I decided to make a second version without foam, and I used Decoville Light instead, and this is that second version. So for this version, I didn't actually make a design for this front panel. I just used a panel of fabric that I had from Backstitch and used that as my design, which I thought was such a great option. I know a lot of us have these kind of smaller panels with fun inspirational sayings on them. We don't really always know what to do with them. This is perfect for that. And you can see on the back, I actually used a different fabric that goes with it for my clutch. And like you can dress up this strap. You can do so much. This is the wristlet version right here. You see it hangs just like that. I think if you're gonna use Decoville Light, the wristlet version's the way to go because it makes it very slim. You can see that the Decoville Light version is much thinner than the foam version. So it really just depends on what look you're going for with your bag. Both are great options. Work with what you've got. The pattern calls for fusible foam. I don't have fusible foam, so I'm gonna show you how I fuse my foam to the pattern when we're working on it. This pattern is from the amazing Diane from Spencer Og. If you've been here for a minute, you know how much I love Spencer Og patterns. Not only are they fantastic patterns that really think about beginners as it's explaining every single step, but they're also really cute and fun. Diane has such an amazing personality. I love her patterns. Diane did send me this pattern for free. I'm just letting you know that. I will have a coupon code for you for the pattern, so make sure you check down in the description for all the information regarding that. I'm gonna be honest, when I was first working through this pattern, there was a lot of confusion, and not because of the pattern, but because I didn't quite see where we were going with it. And I'll mention that while we go through it today, but the pattern started with, okay, it doesn't require a lot of material and fabric. That's fun, I like that. There's not a lot of pieces, so prepping time wasn't like extremely long. And then you start putting it together and it's kind of like, what? I don't see it. I don't see it. Like I see the picture of the outcome, but I don't see it as I'm working with it. And then all of a sudden you turn it all right side out in the end and this is what you have, and it's just like, what? How did I do that? It's so cool. I love this pattern. So I'm really excited to share it with you guys today, to see your versions. You guys are gonna love this. This is a fun one. All right. So if you're new to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, shout outs, comments, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section under this video. At the very top of that comment section will be a comment from me with timestamps for every step of the video. So if you're going through the pattern and there's just one part you're stuck on, go click on the number next to that step in the comment. It'll take you straight there in the video. Just a heads up that today is a very stormy day in Florida, so if the lighting in this video changes a lot throughout, apologies ahead of time. Stick it out with me, guys. We'll get through it. All right, let's get started. So before you get started, you're going to want to print off your pattern pieces. These are on the last 3 pages of the pattern. I will say the very last page has the pattern piece for that extended strap. So if you're not interested in doing that yet, you just need pattern pieces A and B. I would also print off pages 2 and 3 on the pattern. It has all of the extra measurements as well as little tags for you to label each piece. There are a few pieces that are very similar in size, and she refers to the pattern pieces throughout the pattern, so I found printing off those letters and attaching them to each pattern piece helped a lot with following the pattern. Okay, let's talk fabric for the bag. You're gonna need about a half a yard of outer fabric. Now you can get really scrappy with this and really creative. For the main part of the outer bag, I will be using this big, fun Disney print from Miss Mac Fabric. As part of the accent, I'm gonna use some of this vinyl and a little bit of this snacks print from Miss Mac. I'm also gonna be using this vinyl for the wrist strap on the bag. For the lining, you're going to need a half a yard. You have a couple different pocket options here, so you can also get scrappy with that. I'm using one print for everything in the lining today. I also have some waterproof canvas here. I'm gonna be using this for the crossbody strap today. Now I need a strip that's about 3 inches by 50 inches for that crossbody strap. So just whatever you can find. You can use quilt cotton, you can use vinyl. To be honest, waterproof canvas is one of my favorite things to use for straps because you don't have to interface it, it's easy to sew, it's very durable, and it looks really nice. So as a quick option, waterproof canvas works really good. Next up are interfacings. You're gonna need a medium fusible interfacing. So this can be Pellon SF101, or what I'm using today is Woven Fuse from Got Interfacing. You're gonna need about a yard of this. Then you're gonna need some firm fusible interfacing. For that, I'm actually using this Pellon Craft Fuse, which is 808W1. You're gonna need about half a yard of that. And then you're also gonna want some fusible foam. Now, I don't have fusible foam, I only have the sew-in foam. So to help me attach this to the fabric today, I'm actually gonna be using some of this 505 spray. This is what I use when I'm making quilts to stick fabric together. You could use also an Elmer's glue stick, or you could sew in the foam, but you will have bulkier seams, so you wanna be careful about that. This piece right here, you could use Decoville Light for, like I showed you in the beginning of the video. You could use fusible fleece. You have a lot of options here. So if you don't have the fusible foam, don't worry too much about it. You do have other options. You could also use quilt batting and quilt your exterior panels that require the fusible foam and use that instead. That actually sounds like a really beautiful bag that I want to try now. So now for zippers, you're gonna need 3 different zippers. You're gonna need 2 7-inch number 5 zippers and 1 6-inch nylon number 3 zipper. I am just gonna use the zipper tape. This is a number 5 zipper tape. I'm gonna use that for all the pockets today. It's just something I like working with. Again, use what you have here. Since I'm using zipper tape, I'm gonna have 2 zipper pulls that are matching for the exterior of the bag and then a separate zipper pull for the lining of the bag. Since I'm making the crossbody version today, I'm going to need 2 D-rings, 1 slider, and 2 swivel hooks. All of these pieces are 3/4 inch hardware. So here's all the other stuff. I always have a seam ripper and stiletto on hand because it's helpful and because I make many mistakes. I'm using a purple thing today to help me turn out the bag and poke out those corners. I always like to have 2 fabric marking tools, one which is a chalk pencil and one which is an air erasing marker. My thread today is going to be this Mara 100. My needle will be a Microtex 8012. I have a sew on bag label. This is from Inked Papers on Etsy. I'll have a link for that down in the description. I will be adding some rivets today for decoration and to the strap of the bag. These are medium-sized rivets from Emmeline Bags. Again, I'll have a link. A basket full of clips and some pins for pinning the lining together. Now let's go through the pattern pieces. This is pattern piece A. This is what the majority of your bag is going to be made from. From this, you're going to want 4 cuts of your exterior. Now, 2 of my cuts of exterior are interfaced with just the craft fuse, and 2 of my cuts of exterior are interfaced with my woven fuse. The pattern does not suggest interfacing any of your outer panels with your SF101 or woven fuse, but since I'm not using a fusible foam, I did decide to just beef it up a little bit by interfacing the panels that will be attached to my foam with the woven fuse first. This is just a personal choice, it's totally up to you. You're also going to need the 2 cuts of foam or Decoville Light or fusible fleece or quilt batting, whatever you want here to beef up this bag and help it keep its shape. 2 cuts of that from pattern piece A. And then you're going to need 4 cuts of your lining, all 4 cuts interfaced with your woven interfacing. One thing I want to mention about the outer panels. The panels that you interface with your craft fuse are going to go on the center of the bag. So you can see we have our exterior panels, and then we also have the exterior fabric panels that go in the middle of the bag. So whichever ones you interface with your craft fuse are going to go in this center section, and they're not going to be seen as much as the panels on the exterior. So the panels that will be interfaced with foam are going on the outside of the bag. If you have a special print of fabric and you really want to show off something in particular, make sure you think about that beforehand. The craft fuse panels won't be seen very much. The panels that will be interfaced with your foam will be seen much more. Next up is pattern piece B. Now this is just a basic rectangle, so you can have a lot of fun with this. What I like to do is cut out a piece of vinyl using pattern piece B, and then this will go over as my accent piece. But to add a little bit more dimension, I actually take my pattern piece B, fold it in half, and then I cut a second piece of fabric out with a fun design. What I'll do with this fabric is I'll run it right down the center of my pattern piece B. Now we're gonna go over how to do this, so don't worry about that, but you can get very creative. I would just use this pattern piece B as like a template, and you can do whatever you want. She has a lot of great suggestions in the pattern as well. This piece of quilt cotton is interfaced with my woven fuse. The measurements for the rest of the pieces of this bag are on pages 2 and 3 of the pattern, which is why I suggest you print those out. Pattern piece C is going to be your wrist strap. This is going to go on the back of the bag just like this. So this is a piece you can get very creative with. I actually like to add rivets to it just like she shows in the pattern, but you could also add ribbon. You could use fabric here. You have a lot of options to have fun with this piece. Pattern piece D is going to be your card pocket in your lining. Pattern piece D is interfaced with your woven interfacing. If you're using quilt cotton for pattern piece C, you're also going to want to interface that. Since I'm using vinyl, I don't have any interfacing at all on it. Pattern pieces E and F are your lower and upper zip pockets. For pattern piece E, you will interface that with your woven interfacing of choice. Pattern piece F does not have any interfacing at all. Next, we have pattern pieces G, H, and J. G is going to be for the strap connectors on the side of your bag. This is going to hold your wristlet or your crossbody strap. I do like to use vinyl for this just to make it a little bit beefier. If you are using quilt cotton, make sure you interface it with something like Woven Fuse or SF101. I would even add a small piece of Decoville Light to it just to make sure it's strong enough to hold a strap. If you're doing the wristlet, you only need 1 cut of this. If you're doing crossbody, you'll need 2. Next is pattern piece H. This is going to be the tabs for your lining zippers. Pattern piece J will be the tabs for your exterior zippers. And then depending on what type of strap you're doing, a wristlet, guitar strap, slim crossbody strap, you're going to need that piece as well. I'm using pattern piece L since I am doing the slim crossbody strap. If you're using quilt cotton, you will want to interface that with your woven interfacing of choice. I am using waterproof canvas today, so I don't have to interface it with anything. So let's first have some fun with our pattern piece B. Now, if you get confused about which way this is oriented, just keep your pattern piece to the side. The font will help you remember. It goes up and down on the long side. So the first thing I want to do is prep my quilt cotton strap to place over the center of my vinyl. I don't want these raw edges here, so what I'm going to do is just press those back. To do that, I'm grabbing a ruler and a fabric marker, and I'm going to draw parallel lines along the long edges of this quilt cotton at a 1/2 inch in on both of the long sides. Then I'm going to fold those long edges up to meet that marked line so that my fabric is wrong sides together, just like this. I'm pretty much just folding back my seam allowance. Do this on both of the long sides. So now what I want to do is top stitch this down along the center of my vinyl piece B. To do that, I'm just going to find the midpoints along the short edges of my vinyl. I like to just fold it in half and then crease that midpoint mark and then just make a tiny, tiny snip with my scissors. That will help me keep track of where the midpoint mark is. Again, super, super tiny. There we go. So now you can see I have the midpoints marked on my B panel. I'm going to do the same thing with this skinny strip. On these short edges, I'm going to fold along that short edge just to find the middle, and then just cut a tiny triangle right there on both the top and bottom. So now all I have to do is line up my midpoint marks on the top and the bottom of my 2 panels, and I'm just going to clip these together. And I am laying my quilt cotton right side up on top of my vinyl, which is also right side up. You can get very creative with this. You could add some piping right here, which I think would be really pretty. Could add some ribbons down the side, some rivets, all kinds of stuff. This is a really, really fun design. I'm gonna take one of my bag labels and just cut off one of my logos. And now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along these two edges of my fabric panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I'm going to take my bag label and center this and top stitch around my bag label at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This will be my exterior design on the front of my bag. Here we go. Isn't that cute? You can have so much fun. Honestly, I could probably spend the same amount of time just designing this panel as I do building the entire bag. So now grab one of your exterior A panels that does not have the craft fuse attached. Like I said, I did put woven fuse on both of mine just to kind of beef them up a little bit. This is going to be the panel that we apply our B panel to. So if you have fun designs like me, you have to figure out who you're going to cover up, which is just sad. I'm going to cover up Daisy and Minnie. I'm sorry, girls. You know I love you. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to find the midpoints along the top straight edge by cutting that fold, and then the midpoint on the bottom straight edge as well. So I'm just going to line up those rounded corners. Okay, before we attach our B panel, let's go ahead and fold back these long edges so that we can just top stitch this onto the A panel. So just like I did with this center strip, I'm going to turn my B unit right side down, wrong side up. So this time along these two long edges, I'm actually going to mark a line that is 3/4 of an inch in and parallel to those long sides, just like this. Now, since I'm using vinyl, I can't press this. So all I have to do is take my raw edge, fold it wrong sides together so that that raw edge meets up with that marked line, and then clip in place. What we're doing is we're folding back a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, once you have these edges clipped, we can go ahead and attach this to our A panel. So finding those midpoint marks on your A panel and also using the midpoint marks on your B panel, lay your unit down right side up with the A panel right side up. So everything is right side up, looking good. Match up those midpoint marks on the top edge and clip. Go ahead and match up the midpoint marks on the bottom edge as well. And then all we have to do is clip along the top and bottom edges to line up this accent panel. And like I showed you in the beginning of the video, if you have a fun panel and you don't want this accent panel, just skip it. You don't need to do it. I mean, you can see some of these designs are so much fun. They don't need anything extra. I could just leave the A panel just like this. So this is completely your choice on how much you add and what you do with this panel. So now I'm going to go around this entire B unit and top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is going to attach the sides, and it's also going to keep my top and bottom edges in place. All right, so there is my accent panel. If you wanted to, you could add some rivets here. You could have so much fun with this, but I'm done with this, so I'm just gonna put this to the side. Now we're gonna grab our C panel, and this is gonna be that palm strap that goes on the side of the bag. Lay it wrong side up and mark a midpoint line that runs in between the center of those long edges. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can use an iron to press this. Since I'm using vinyl, I'm just gonna use clips. Take your long raw edge and fold it wrong sides together up to meet that midpoint line and add some clips. Once you have the two long edges clipped, now we're just going to fold the whole thing in half so that we're hiding those raw edges that go along the middle. And then just add each of the folded edges into each other's clips. She suggests clipping down the edges if you have a thicker fabric. So, for example, I'm going to remove the clips on one side, and you can see both of my folds come in just like this. Her suggestion is to go into this fold and clip down towards the raw edge, just like that. This is going to help reduce the bulk right here, which is going to be helpful when sewing the whole bag together. So I'm going to do this on both sides. So you can see I just clipped down the edges from that corner all the way down across. It's okay if it's messy, it's not gonna be seen. Really what we want is just to make sure this spot right here isn't super thick. Having this thinner will make it easier to sew over at your sewing machine. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other edge as well. Now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along both of the long folded edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have your strap top stitched, this is another opportunity to have some fun. So I'm actually gonna add some rivets here. Now I have a tabletop rivet press, which makes this very easy, so it's fun to use it. You could also add Chicago screws. You could add anything, honestly. You could get really creative with this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add 4 rivets, and they're all gonna be 2 inches apart. So all I have to do is take my ruler and line it up with my strap, just like this. And I'm gonna line up the 1/2 of an inch mark along the long edge of my strap. Just try to keep it as straight as possible. I know that strap can kind of bend on you. There we go. Then I'm gonna take my fabric marking tool, and at the 2 inch mark, I'm gonna make a dot. Same at the 4 inch mark, the 6 inch mark, and the 8 inch mark. So now I should have 4 dots that are centered and 2 inches apart. I'm gonna grab my rivet press. Mine is from Cam Snaps. It is one of the most fun tools I've ever purchased for sewing. I do not regret this purchase at all. So I'm gonna put in my hole punch die. I have a 2.5 millimeter hole punch die that I also got from Cam Snaps. And all I have to do is find my dots, line them up right underneath the tip of the hole punch die, and then it will cut out a perfect hole for me. Just like that. You see we have a nice hole right here. I'm gonna go ahead and do it with the other 3 dots. All right, once I have those holes punched, I'm just gonna grab 4 of my rivets. So rivets have a long end and a short end, a male and a female end. And I just insert those into those punched holes and then just snap them in place. This will just hold them together until I can press them with the machine. So for a strap like this with just vinyl, you don't wanna use rivets that are too long because it might not be able to press them down. These are gonna be fine, but any longer than this would be too long for this strap. So now I'm gonna take out the hole punch die and I'm gonna insert a 10 millimeter rivet die. This is also from Cam Snaps. I bought all of this together. And those are the items I use the most. My 2.5 millimeter hole punch die and my 10 millimeter rivet die. And now I'm just going to set my rivets inside the die and push down. And you can see it just pushes it in place perfectly. These are just a really beautiful way to jazz up your bag. Totally not necessary here, but beautiful. All right, now my strap is ready to be attached. So now grab your other exterior panel. This is the one that does not have the craft fuse. It might just have the woven fuse or SF101 if you added it like I did. So I actually think it's easiest to fuse any fusible interfacing you have for these 2 exterior panels now before adding this strap. I know some fusible interfacing like Decoville Light is easiest to fuse from the front. If you add your strap on now and then try to fuse it, it can be challenging. So I'm actually going to attach my foam now and then I'll attach my strap. So grab your foam cuts or Decoville Light or fusible fleece, whatever you want to use. Now you'll notice this is the same size as that exterior panel because we used our pattern piece A to cut them out. So before we glue these on, we need to trim them down. So grab a ruler. And we're gonna actually trim 3/8 of an inch off around the entire outer edge of both of these foam panels. So using your ruler, I'm gonna start on the bottom and I'm gonna line up my 3/8 of an inch tick mark along that bottom edge. And using any sort of a fabric marking device, I'm just gonna draw a line like that. Don't worry about the curves just yet. We'll deal with those after we mark all of the flat edges first. So then I'm gonna go to the side and mark 3/8 of an inch in. And then I'll go to the top edge, once again, marking 3/8 of an inch in. And then I'll do the other short edge, marking 3/8 of an inch in. Now you can use your other foam piece here or your pattern piece, but you're gonna line it up so that the short edge lines up with the short edge that you marked and the bottom long edge lines up with the bottom long edge that you marked, just like this. This is just gonna allow us to have a nice clean curve. So all we have to do is match up our template with that side and bottom edge and then trace along the curve. And now you have a nice 3/8 of an inch curve on the bottom. Do the same thing on the other side. So matching it up with the short mark that we made and matching it up with the long mark that we made. and then just tracing around the corner to meet those two lines. Once you have your 3/8 of an inch inner panel marked, all you have to do is go in and then just trim it down. If you were gonna make a lot of these, I do suggest you make your own pattern piece for this piece right here. That'll just save some time and material. So that way you can just cut out your foam from the beginning at this smaller size. Once you have one trimmed down, go ahead and repeat this process to trim down the other one. Okay, now there are a lot of options out there that help you fuse two non-fusible pieces together. What I have is this 505 basting spray because I'm a quilter. This is gonna work just fine for this project. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to spray one of my foams, and then I'm going to lay it and center it on the back of my outer exterior panel. So once you have the glue sprayed on, and you might want to spray it on outside because it does have a smell, you're just gonna lay it and center it over that exterior panel. So now you see my exterior panel with the accent has the foam already attached. I'm gonna go ahead and do this with the other exterior panel as well. Like I said, I haven't yet added my strap. I'm gonna do that next. So once again, I'm just gonna spray this foam and add it to the back of this exterior panel. Just remember, these are panels that don't have the craft fuse. The craft fuse panels are more like paper, and we haven't used those yet. And when I'm spraying the glue on, I'm making sure that I get along the edges of the panel because those can pull up pretty easily, especially when we're turning the bag out. If you have a problem with that later, using some Beacon 3-in-1 glue is gonna help you a lot. And so if I have to use it, I'll show you how to do it. Now in the pattern, she does cut down these corners at an angle. You're more than welcome to do that. Even if you fused it on, you could actually just pull it up really quickly and trim it down so that it's just like this. You could also leave it with the corners in, but this will be easier to sew if you trim down those corners. So you can see, even though I already applied the glue, I can still pull it off, especially at the corner. Easy peasy. So your exterior panel should now look like this on the back and like this on the front, however you did your design over here. Now we're gonna add our strap. Now she gives you the measurements for this in the pattern. You're just gonna measure down from the top straight edge and then line up your strap with the bottom of your ruler. Your strap should be longer than your panel. That's normal. So I'm just going to attach one side first, and then I'm going to push up my strap a little bit so that I can get the very edge of my strap up against the very edge of that outer panel. So your strap should have a little bump to it now. Now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and just baste down these short strap ends at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Aren't these exterior panels just adorable? This is such a fun bag. Oh, I love it. So now we're gonna work on the exterior panels that have the craft fuse. So if you haven't already attached that firm interfacing to the back of these two exterior panels, go ahead and do that now. Grab your A panel piece, and you'll notice that there is a design on the center. You're gonna wanna cut that out so that you have this nice open oval. Grab one of your exterior panels and lay it wrong side up, and then lay your pattern piece over the back of it. If it helps, you can clip this pattern piece in place. We want to be pretty exact here, so you don't really want this panel piece moving around on you. So now grab a fabric marking tool and just trace on the back of that exterior panel piece that inner oval, just like this. Okay, once you have that traced, you can remove your pattern piece. Now take your other exterior piece that has the craft fuse, remember we're only working with the two craft fuse pieces, and lay it so that they're right sides together. So we should sandwich it just like this, wrong sides out on both sides, right sides together. Line up all of the edges and clip in place. Now this unit here is probably what confused me the most. I didn't quite understand what this was until the very end of the bag. But this is what holds the two pockets together, so you'll see. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're just going to stitch over this line. She suggests shortening your stitch length as you go over this line to make it really sturdy. So I'm gonna use a 2mm stitch length here. Now what we wanna do is cut out this inner circle, but leave about 1/8 of an inch seam around the stitching. So I'm going to use my seam ripper to first just kind of slice down the center, and then I'm going to use my scissors to get in and cut. Again, I'm going anywhere between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch in from those stitches. So we just want to create a hole here, but keep the stitches intact. So once you have that inner oval cut out, now we just want to cut some slits right around these curves. So I would say cut quite a few. I actually cut them kind of spaced out, and then I go back in and cut in between those spaces. You just want this to have a nice smooth edge when we turn it out. So do this for all 4 corners, just cutting into the seam close to the stitches, but not actually cutting your stitches. These slits allow the fabric to spread out and fold over itself so that there's no tightening around these curves and you have a really nice smooth curve. So now what you want to do is flip this right side out. So they can sound a little complicated, but just watch. I'm going to start with the bottom first. You're going to fold one of your edges up and into that center circle, and then fold it back so that they're wrong sides together. You see that? And you're just going to do this to all of it. So you're pretty much just tucking one edge into that circle and then pulling it back so that they're wrong sides together. So if you use craft fuse here, that interfacing is going to help you out right now because it's almost like paper. It just wants to fold back on itself, which is nice. But you will also want to fuse this with an iron. So once you get one side lined up, grab your iron and press on that edge and along the whole panel. You'll notice that craft fuse, when it's hot, it becomes very fabric-y, very loosey-goosey, and then when it dries, it becomes stiff like paper. So use that hot moment to kind of lay it the way you want, and then as it cools off, it'll stiffen up. So I'm just going to go around the entire panel, pressing down that inner oval and then also pressing down the edges. If you notice that a lot of it is pulling up and it's not staying as flat as you want, while it's nice and hot, grab one of your rulers and just lay it on top, just like this. That way when the craft fuse cools down and the glue dries, it'll dry super flat, just like this with your ruler on top of it. So here is our inner portion of our bag. I gotta be honest, most of the time while I was making this bag, I thought this was some sort of a fancy handle that was going to be inserted into it at some point, and we just didn't see it in the pictures. It's not a handle, it's how you connect the 2 pouches together. We'll go over that as we go through the bag. So now you can go ahead and take all of your exterior panels and lay them to the side. We're gonna work on the lining now. So grab your lining panel, piece D. This is gonna be for your little card pocket. Lay this wrong side up, and we're gonna work on the 2 shorter edges. So take a moment to make sure you see which edges are your shorter edges. On these 2 shorter edges, I'm gonna use my ruler and I'm going to mark a line that is parallel to those shorter edges and 3/4 of a way in to the center. So I'm marking it on the wrong side of the fabric. So 3/4 of an inch in that way and 3/4 of an inch in on the top as well. Now I'm gonna fold the raw edge, wrong sides together, up to meet that marked line and then press with my iron. We're just creating a 3/8 of an inch hem. Go ahead and do this on both sides that you marked. Okay, once you have these pressed, now we're going to fold our unit so that the fabrics are right sides together, and we're folding it so those pressed edges meet. So it should be just like this. Your folded pressed edges should be meeting right sides together. You can go ahead and clip to hold these in place. And then you can grab your iron and just press this down so you have a nice flat unit. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along these 2 short raw edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You're going to leave this pressed edge open and leave the folded edge alone as well. We're just closing up the sides. So before we turn this right side out, I'm just going to gently clip down these corners. I'm not getting very close to the stitches. I just don't want a bulky corner here up top. This is at the top where the folded edge is. I'm leaving the corners down here by the opening alone. Now I'm going to take my unit and turn it right side out through that opening that we left on the bottom. Make sure you keep that edge folded. If you need a little extra help, grab your turning tool. I have that purple thing, and poke up into those corners. We want to keep this a nice straight rectangle. Now you want to push out the side seams, keeping everything else nice and straight. So I'm just going to press the short edges first, and then once I have the short edges pressed down, I'll press down the entire unit and this top folded edge as well. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch along this folded edge. We still have that open edge on the bottom. Go ahead and leave that alone. We're only top stitching along the folded edge. So now grab your lining A unit, and we just want to find the midpoint along that top straight edge. So I'm just going to fold along that edge, and I'm going to pinch and just trim a teeny tiny triangle right at that top edge. And I think I'm also going to find the midpoint on the bottom just to help me make sure this pocket is nice and squared up. Now you can take your little pocket that you made and then fold it so we can find the midpoint along that top stitched edge. And for that, you don't want to clip it, but you can use a pin and just poke right there. So in the pattern, she's going to tell you how far to go down from that top straight edge of your lining panel. Just go ahead and measure down, use one of your grid marks to line up with the midpoint mark, and then use that same grid mark to help you line it up with your marked midpoint on your pocket. This just keeps everything nice and centered. Once you have your pocket lined up against the bottom of your ruler, you can move your ruler out of the way. And then since it's all quill cotton, we can just use pins here and pin into the center of the pocket to hold it to that A unit. Don't pin too close to the edges because that's where we're going to be sewing. So mostly just pin on the center. Now the one challenge you might run into here is this bottom edge. If one of your folded edges is folded in more than the other, when you were top stitching, you might not catch both of them. So before we go to the sewing machine, just go ahead and check and make sure both of your folded edges are meeting. And then just keep an eye on it also at the sewing machine. You want to make sure you catch all of these edges. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and top stitch along the short sides and the bottom edge. Leave the top edge unsewn. We're only top stitching along the sides and the bottom. Make sure you back stitch well at the beginning and the end. Once you have that top stitched on, you can remove your pins. And now it's your choice. You can leave this as one pocket just like that, or you can take your ruler, find the midpoint mark, grab a chalk pencil, and draw a midpoint mark along the middle, and then top stitch over that midpoint mark back and forth. I actually did that on both of the other pouches. I happen to like this a little bit bigger, so I'm actually not going to top stitch a midpoint mark today. I'm just going to leave it this size. I think it's a perfect size. Once you have your pocket done, go ahead and put this panel to the side. Now you're going to grab your 6-inch lining zipper. If you're using zipper tape, I suggest cutting off a piece that's 7.5 inches long. If you're using zipper tape, don't forget to add your zipper pull now. Now when I add my zipper pull to zipper tape, as I open it, I keep both ends closed. Now you can take this to the sewing machine and top stitch over the ends of your zipper tape just to make sure your zipper pull doesn't go flying off at any point. I think in this case you're going to be okay. Just do your best to keep them closed. If you have one end that's open, you will want to go top stitch that end closed, because as we add the tabs, having the ends closed is going to make this much easier. If you see that you have any kind of wonky cuts on the edges of your zipper tape like I do, go ahead and trim that down. We want to keep the zipper tape nice and straight. Once your zipper is nice and straight, grab your H units. And what we're going to do is we're going to take one H unit and lay it right side down over our zipper. Just like this, lining up the short edges and the long edges. You can clip this in place. I find clipping this unit in place along the long edges holds it straight better than just clipping it along the short edge. So once you have this H unit clipped on, flip your zipper over and apply another H cut right side down to the back of your zipper. So this is just like a little sandwich with your H units and the zipper in the middle. Go ahead and add that second H unit to your clips. So you should have something just like this now. And I'm going to add one more clip onto the short edge just to keep it together. Do the same thing on the other side of your zipper. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along both short edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you're using a standard zipper with a stop, you just want to sew as close as you can to that zipper stop. Using a zipper foot here is helpful to help you get the thread close to the stopper without actually hitting it. However, since I'm using zipper tape, I'm just going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have those tabs stitched on, you can remove your clips. And then you want to pull your H units back from the zipper so that they're wrong sides together, lining up the long edges and the short edges. And then you can just press along the seam right by the zipper tape. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side of your zipper. Now, just to help with attaching this zipper in the next step, let's go to the sewing machine and just baste along both of the short edges of your zipper tab on the outside at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. After you have your zipper all ready to go, grab your pattern pieces E. So these are the pattern pieces that have the woven interfacing on them. Take one of your pattern piece E's and lay it right side up. Now we can find the midpoint of this to help us center our zipper. So I'm just going to fold along that long straight edge and then pinch and clip. Now I'm gonna mark the center of my zipper as well. So I'm gonna take my zipper and fold it in half and mark the midpoint on both edges of my zipper tape. Now with your pocket E right side up, take your zipper and lay it down right side down, lining up your midpoint mark on your zipper tape with the midpoint mark on your pattern piece E. I'm going to use a clip to clip that first, and then I'll clip along the entire edge. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and just baste this down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold it in place before I attach the next panel. So now grab your other E unit and lay that right side down against the back of your zipper tape. So your E units should now be right sides together. Line it up along that edge, making sure you line it up with the sides of the E unit, not the sides of the zipper tab. The zipper tabs are overextending. If you use zipper tape like I did, it's a little bit longer than it is in the pattern. Now let's go stitch along this top clipped edge, stitching the zipper in place at 1/4 inch seam allowance. You do want to make sure you're using a zipper foot here. All right, once you have these stitched on, you can go ahead and trim down the excess zipper tabs. You could have probably used a 7-inch zipper tape here instead of 7.5 inches, but I'm okay with it. Now take your unit and fold both of the E panels back so that they're wrong sides together. To make it a little easier, I'll take one panel and fold it up so that it's going away from the zipper. And then I'll just press along that seam, just like that. And then I'll grab the other one and press that wrong sides together with the other E unit, lining up the sides and the bottom really well so it's a nice rectangle. We don't have any kind of wonky edges anywhere. And then press along the zipper. And this zipper tape is plastic, and it's okay if you run your iron over it. Now we're just going to top stitch along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have the E units top stitched, let's grab our F units. With your zipper right side up, grab one of your F units and lay it right side down, lining it up with that top raw edge of your zipper. Grab some clips and just clip along that edge. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and just baste along this top clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold this in place. If you have a big zipper pull like I do, make sure you don't have that in the way. You don't want to hit that with your needle. Once you have that basted on, go ahead and flip over your unit so the wrong side of the zipper is facing up. Grab your remaining F unit and lay that right side down, lining it up with the top raw edge of your zipper, and clip in place. Make sure you have the sides and the bottom all lined up as well. You don't want to have any wonky lineup like this. You want to keep everything nice and straight. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you move that zipper pull out of the way as you're sewing. Once you have these F units sewn onto your zipper, let's go ahead and press them away from the zipper tape. So once again, I'm just going to press one unit at a time, flip it over, pull up, and press the other unit. Do your best to keep everything nice and square. These F units are a little bit trickier to keep straight because they don't have any interfacing on them, so they stretch more than maybe the other lining pieces you've worked with. It's okay if they're a little wonky on the sides, you just don't want them to be really off. You know what I mean? So now we're going to take the long raw edge of our F unit and fold it down over the right side of our zipper so that it meets the long raw edge of our E unit. So let's clip along this raw edge over here. And then you can go ahead and press, just the corners will be fine, honestly. We just want these edges to be nice and straight. So one side should look just like this. The other side should be the back of your zipper, not the front of your zipper. So check yourself, because I've made this mistake many times. Make sure at this point you're looking at the back of your zipper tape. Add some clips to the sides as well as the bottom. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along the short side edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Leave the bottom edge open. All right, once you have these edges sewn, go ahead and trim down that seam allowance in half. Now we can flip this whole unit right side out so that the zipper is facing the outside now. I'm gonna once again use my purple thing to poke these corners. All right, and once you have those corners poked out, just go ahead and roll your side seams so that they're as straight as possible, and then press. We want to press this whole thing right side out as a nice rectangle. You might find it's a little bit tricky to get the seams to roll properly where the zipper tape is because you have a lot of bulk there. That's okay. This is where if you were to use a smaller zipper here, so maybe a 7-inch cut of your zipper tape or even a 6.5 inch cut of your zipper tape, that would have been good. So yeah, I find these corners right here to be a little bulky. I think that's just because I made my zipper tape a little too long. So if you wanted this to be thinner and you're using zipper tape, I would cut down the zipper tape so that it's 6.5 inches long. That way this part would be shorter, but then you would have more of the tabs on the side so you're not sewing over zipper tape here on the side. So once again, grab one of your A lining units and let's go ahead and find the midpoint of the bottom edge this time. Using your zipper pocket unit, let's also find the bottom midpoint of this as well. So I'm just folding along that bottom edge. And here I'm going to use a pin to mark the midpoint. Now we're just going to line up the bottom midpoint mark of our pocket with the bottom edge of our A unit. So this should be all raw edges lined up together. Once you have it centered, you can go ahead and add some clips along that bottom edge. And if it makes it easier, you can take some more heavy-duty pins and pin through the pocket and your A lining units just to hold this whole rectangle in place. So I'm even going to pin up here along the top just to hold it nice and flat, just like that. So now we're going to do 2 top stitching events. First, we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch around all 4 edges of our pocket. Then I'm going to top stitch 3/8 of an inch in again. So that 3/8 of an inch is going to top stitch closer to my zipper on the sides and also on the top right here. So 1/8 of an inch in around the whole rectangle and then 3/8 of an inch in, making just a smaller rectangle inside. That's also going to hide these exposed seams on the inside. All right, here we go. Now we have our zipper pocket top stitched onto our lining. If you look closely, you'll see I am not the straightest top stitcher, and I'm okay with that. Now we're gonna work on the strap carriers, which are pattern piece G. If you're making a wristlet, you only need one of these, otherwise you need 2. Go ahead and mark a midpoint line along the long edge of your straps. Take those parallel long raw edges and fold them wrong sides together up to meet that midpoint line. If you're using any sort of a quilt cotton here, you can press this with an iron. Since I'm using vinyl, I'm just going to use some clips to hold it in place. Make sure you do both edges. Repeat this for your other strap tab. Now we're going to take these to the sewing machine and top stitch along both of the long folded edges on both strap tabs at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now grab your D-rings and slide your strap so that the raw edges are against the flat side of your D-ring and fold the strap around that flat edge of your D-ring, and then clip along those short edges. If you have two, go ahead and do this for both of them. Now we're just going to go to the sewing machine and just quickly baste over these short edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to add our strap tabs to our exterior panels. So grab your exterior panel with the handle, and your strap tab is going to come in 1 inch down, and it's going to be 1 inch in. So this means your strap tab is going to overhang along this raw edge just a little bit. So what I do is I take my ruler and I measure 1 inch down from the top, and then I line up one of my inch guides along the very edge here as well. This will allow me to have a nice little 1 inch square on the upper corner of my outer panel. So I want my folded edge by my D-ring to come in at that 1 inch in from the outer panel. And then I just want the whole thing to lay up against the ruler. I know normally we don't do this, but this does allow the strap to have a little bit more security. So you can see I have a bit of overhang over here, which is what we want. After you have it lined up the way you want it, grab a clip and just clip that in place as best you can. If you're making the crossbody, you're going to want to do the same thing, but on the other exterior panel. You don't want to put both of your strap tabs on the same exterior panel, because then it makes the bag a little wonky. So we're going to put a strap tab on each exterior panel. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to attach it on the exact same side. So once again, I'm going to make myself a little 1 inch box up here on the top right, and then I'll clip it in place just like that. So you can see in the end, these will be like this. They'll be wrong sides together, and that will allow you to have a strap tab on both sides of the bag. Let's take this to the sewing machine and just baste down these strap tabs at about an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the edge of your outer panel. Okay, once you have your strap tabs installed, go ahead and put this to the side for a little bit. So now we're going to work on our exterior zipper tabs. Go ahead and lay all 4 of them wrong side up. I'm going to grab a ruler and a fabric marking pen, and I'm going to draw a 1/2 of an inch line along each zipper tab. So you can see I'm doing the bottom edge of this zipper tab. I'll rotate it 180 degrees, and then once again draw a 1/2 of an inch line. So your lines should end up being parallel to one another. Do this for all 4 of your zipper tabs. Once you have all of your lines marked, now we're just going to fold the parallel raw edge to your marked line up, wrong sides together, to meet that marked line. What we're doing is we're folding this in so that we have a little 1/4 inch hem here. Once you have one edge pressed, go ahead and do the same for the other edge on each of your zipper tabs. Once you have the edges folded in, now you can just fold the entire strap tab in half so that the back side is not seen at all anymore. Okay, so now if you're using zipper tape like I am, I'm just going to cut 2 pieces of zipper tape down to 8 inches each. Don't forget to add your zipper pulls if you're using zipper tape. So once you have your zippers ready to go, make sure you have a nice straight edge on the ends of your zipper tape. Sometimes I cut mine kind of crooked. You want this to be as straight as possible because those zipper tabs are going to require a straight place to lay down. So now grab one of your little zipper tabs and just hug it around the edge of your zipper tape. It should be wider than your zipper tape. Just make sure all the edges of your zipper tape are snug in that zipper tab. And then I just add a couple clips to hold it in place. Do this on both ends of both of your zippers. I'm going to take these to the sewing machine and top stitch along both long edges of each zipper tab. So along the long edge closest to the zipper teeth and along the long edge farthest away from the center of my zipper teeth. Do this for both zippers, all 4 edges. Once you have your 4 zipper tabs attached, if they are longer than your zipper tape, just go ahead and trim them down so that it's just one nice unit. Now grab your exterior panel with the strap on it. And we want to make sure we have the midpoint marked along this top. And now we want to find the midpoint marks of our zippers as well. So now it's time to really pay attention to the directions, because you want your zippers to end up with the zipper when closed on the same side. So make sure you know which side opens and which side closes on your zipper, and you want them to end up the same. So in the pattern it says if you're making the shoulder bag like we are, you're going to take your zipper and lay it right side down, matching up our midpoint lines, and when the zipper is closed, it'll be on the left. So if you're looking at the picture in the pattern as of August 2020, it's the opposite of what it looks like in the picture. So I'm gonna clip right where my midpoints are first, and then I'll clip out. Your zipper is shorter than the top edge of this A panel. It's supposed to be shorter. There we go. So if you're making the shoulder bag, this is how it should look. If you're making the wristlet, your zipper is gonna be on the other side. Now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm just gonna baste down along this edge of the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have your zipper basted on, oh, look how cute this is looking. It looks so good. Grab one of your lining pieces that does not have any sort of pocket on it and lay it right side down over the back of that zipper. So just line it up with that top edge of your exterior panel and clip it together. Now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you're using a zipper foot here and make sure you move the zipper pull out of the way while you're sewing. Okay, once you have the lining and the exterior sewn onto your zipper, you can push the lining away. Push the seam behind the exterior. So leave the lining up just like this, and then the seam with the zipper is going behind the exterior panel. Now we're gonna top stitch on the exterior panel, but we're leaving the lining out of it. We're only top stitching over the exterior panel and the seam that holds the lining and the zipper tape and the exterior panel. You see what I'm saying? The lining stays up and out of this. Once you have that top stitch down, now we can just fold that lining back so that the wrong side of the lining is against the wrong side of the exterior panel. Once you have all of these edges lined up, you can just press along the zipper just to keep the lining down and in the right spot. So once you have the lining pressed to the back of your exterior with a strap, grab your lining panel that has that little zipper on it and lay that right side up. Grab your exterior panel and then line up the top edge of your zipper tape. You should have a midpoint mark there. Line that up with the midpoint mark on your lining panel, and everything is right side up. The exterior is right side up, the zipper is right side up, and your lining panel is right side up. Add a clip to that midpoint first, and then clip out to the sides. I'm gonna go ahead and baste this down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, this is where you should be now. You have your exterior with your strap, you have your zipper right side up, lining with the zip pocket attached on the back. There we go. So this is the middle of your bag. So what you want to do is lay it down on top of the right side of your zipper. Pull back this top layer of this middle section so that you see the wrong side of the other outer panel. You see what I'm saying? We see the right side of the zipper right here and then the wrong side of our little loop. Clip the panel with the wrong side facing up to the right side of your zipper tape along this top raw edge. So this is what it should look like. You have your loop on top. If you fold back that top layer of your loop, you have the other side of your loop clipped right sides together with the zipper. Now I'm going to put my zipper in the middle so it's easier to sew around. Now we're going to sew along this edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this step was a little confusing to me because I couldn't quite understand the picture. If you fold this top loose edge of your hoop up, just like this, and then take the entire little loop and fold it up, you'll see you get a similar picture as what's in the instructions. This edge right here is just the other side of your loop. So what you want to do now is you can get an iron to do this or you can just finger press. You want to take the seam that's behind this edge, so the seam we just sewed, and push it behind this exterior panel loop. So not the lining with the zip pocket stays down facing your belly and you're going to just push this exterior fabric loop up. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch on the exterior panel at 1/8 of an inch. It's going to catch the exterior panel and the seam, but the lining panel is still down against the lining panel on the other side of my unit. All right, once you have that top stitched, we just have to do pretty much the same thing with the other exterior panel. I'm going to walk you through it. So grab your other exterior panel with the design on it and lay it right side up. Grab your zipper pull, and if you're making the shoulder bag, you're going to lay your zipper right side down with the zipper, when closed, facing the right side. If you're making the wristlet, it's going to be the opposite. I know. So I'm going to match up the midpoint mark on my zipper tape with the midpoint mark on my panel first, and then add some clips to hold it together. Now, if you want to make sure you have your zippers correct, grab your other unit and just fold it down so that the zipper is on the top. Remember, these two panels are going to be facing in opposite directions in the end, just like this. So right here, when closed, I have my zipper on the left. On the opposite panel, also, when closed, the zipper is on the left. You see what I mean? You just kind of have to check it before you wreck it. You just have to check it before you stitch it all down. So once you have your zipper pinned, we're going to go ahead and base this down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold it in place. So once you have that basted on, grab your next lining panel that doesn't have any pocket on it and lay it right side down, lining up that top edge. So that zipper is sandwiched in between your lining and your exterior, or right sides together. So now let's go to the sewing machine and sew along this entire clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So once you have that stitched down, go ahead and pull your lining up and push the seam so that it goes behind the exterior panel. Now, if you have a design panel like I do that gets kind of bulky, this might be a little difficult to push that seam down, but just do your best. And we're just gonna kind of work on it at the machine to keep it in place. So with that lining panel up and out of the way, we're going to top stitch along our exterior panel, top stitching over the exterior panel and the seam on the back, but leaving the lining panel out of it. Once you have that exterior panel top stitched, you can just fold your lining down so that it's wrong side against the wrong side of your exterior. Line up all of the edges and then just press right next to that zipper tape just to keep everything together. Grab your next lining panel, this should have your little card pocket in it, and lay it right side up, and with your zipper right side up, line up the midpoint of the top edge of your zipper tape with the midpoint on the top edge of your lining. So you can see we have exterior right side up, zipper right side up, and the back lining panel right side up. Go ahead and clip along this entire edge. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and baste along that clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now that we have that lining panel basted on, the lining panel with that pocket, it's basted on, grab your other unit, your exterior unit that has that middle loop, and now we're going to attach the other side of this middle loop. So take your unit and the raw edge of your loop that has not been sewn on yet, lay that right side down against the right side of your zipper, and then just clip along that entire straight edge. There we go. So now we should have that remaining exterior center panel edge, and then our exterior panel attached to our lining around the zipper. We're going to sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this is what you should have. Your middle unit has been sewn on. You can pull the whole thing back. So we're just focusing on the zipper that's attached to the exterior with your design. And what you want to do is you want to fold that seam allowance so that it's behind the exterior on your loop. So it's kind of messy right now, I know, but just push the seam with the zipper tape so that it's behind this middle exterior unit right here. And now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch along this edge. So you're top stitching over the exterior panel with the loop and then the seam. You're not going to top stitch over any of the lining. The lining is all tucked to the side. It's just the seam and the exterior panel. Alrighty, they're pretty much all attached. So now grab your little hoop handle here and pull that to one side and then pull the rest of the panels to the opposite side. So you can see at this point I kind of thought this was some sort of a unique purse handle. I wasn't quite sure. It's not a purse handle. So she suggests using some tape here to help hold these D-rings out of the way while we sew the next part. I think that's a good idea because these things can move around a lot and you do not want to sew over those. So before we do anything, let's unzip our zippers about 3/4 of an inch away. They should be on the same sides, just like that. Okay. So now take your unit with the embellishment side right side up, just taking that outer exterior layer, fold it up so that it's right sides together with one layer of your hoop exterior fabric. And then we're going to clip it together. Now, with this hoop exterior fabric, you're going to want to separate the two layers. We don't want to sew this to both layers, only one of them. So you're going to have to pick it up, and I like to line up the corners just to kind of give me an idea of where everything's going to go. Here we go. And then you want to line up the seams between the exterior and lining panels on both of these units so that they're in the same spot, and then clip. So you can see I'm working with one exterior unit with the embellishment and then an exterior panel that's on that hoop. And then I have my lining panel that doesn't have anything and my lining panel that has that little card pocket. The other pieces of this puzzle are behind what I'm working on. I'm only dealing with this one side. So now what we want to do is just add clips along the entire edge of this unit. So this should be where you're at. You see I have my exteriors pinned. I have one layer of the hoop exterior clipped to the exterior panel I'm working with, and then the other layer is just hanging free. Okay, so on the bottom of your lining panels that are clipped together, remember this stuff here, just ignore it. The bottom of the lining panels that are clipped together, let's mark a 5-inch opening. You want a nice big opening to turn this out later. There we go. And if you'd like, transfer these barks onto the back of your other lining panel as well, because you might find one side easier to sew. You want to make sure you can see them on both sides. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and starting at one of the marks, we're going to start stitching at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch really well. So as we go around this corner, we're going to be at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Once we pass the corner, we're going to start decreasing our seam allowance to 3/8 of an inch. By the time you get to this seam, you should be at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to go around the entire exterior at a 3/8 inch seam allowance until we get to the other seam. Once you get to this seam and you start working on the lining, you can once again increase your seam allowance to 5/8 of an inch. So by the time you get to your second mark, you are at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and make sure you backstitch well here. The point of this is that the seam allowance in the lining should be bigger so that it doesn't become really baggy. Your lining doesn't need as much space as your exterior does. So the exterior is pretty much at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. The lining is at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, but where they meet needs to be a 3/8 inch seam allowance. When I'm sewing this, I'm actually going to sew it from the other side. It's really, really easy for you to accidentally sew over this panel right here if you sew it this side up with the foam side up. So I'm going to flip it so that I have my loop right side up, and then what I do is I pull back this fabric and I sew from this side. That way I always know I'm only getting the fabric I'm interested in under the needle. All right, so here we go. We have that one layer sewn together. You can see just like this. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So grab your exterior panel that has that strap and fold it up so that it's right sides together with the remaining middle layer. So we're just going to line up the exterior with the strap with the exterior hoop. And I'm just gonna line up those corners first. And then we wanna go and line up the seams next. And then you can go around the entire edge, clipping together the exterior panels right sides together and the lining panels right sides together. All right, so just like we did before, we're gonna stitch along this clipped edge. This time we don't need to leave an opening anywhere. So on the lining side, you're at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. On the exterior side, you're at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Where they meet along the seam right here is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm going to sew this with the side I'm sewing down. So the side I already sewed, I'm going to have that up so that I can just move it to the side and sew along my clipped edge while just holding back this other edge. Once you have it all sewn together, grab your lining unit that has that hole, and we're just going to push open the seam and press. This will make it easier to top stitch after we turn the bag right side out. So just push that seam back and press it with your iron. Flip it over. It doesn't have to be a perfect size or anything. Now you can trim down the seam allowance in your lining a little bit if you increased it like I did, just so it's not so bulky. So I'm just gonna trim down pretty much where the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance is. I'm gonna do this for both of my lining units. I'm keeping the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the seam, but then I'm just trimming it down as I get to that bigger seam allowance. And then you can go to your exterior units and just clip some straight lines around those curves to help this spread out a little bit. So I'm gonna do both sides of my exterior curves. So now this is totally optional, but if you have your foam pulling up on any of the edges pretty bad, use some Beacon 3-in-1 glue and just a light amount of glue. Not a lot, we're not gonna drench it or anything, but just use a little bit of this glue along those edges. When we push this right side out, it's gonna push on this foam a lot, so you just don't want it coming undone and, you know, completely detaching. Now let's turn it right side out. I find it's easier to push it through the hole than it is to pull it through the hole. So I'll put my hand in here to kind of get it started, but it's pretty stiff. So really what I'm more focused on is pushing this exterior through that hole. So you see I'm not reaching in and pulling it out. I'm taking it from the back of the exterior and pushing it through the hole. If you have any of that tape, you can take that off. Okay, so once you have it most of the way berthed, put your hand in through the hole in the lining and work on pushing out those corners of your exterior. Make sure you push out the corners of both exterior panels. Remember, this is kind of like two little pouches attached to one another. So you have two pouches you have to keep an eye on. So push out all those corners. For the corners on the top edge, it's easier if you just push your hand in through the lining side and kind of push out. You see we have those little tabs, so you'll probably have a bit of a gap between the zipper tab and the edge. That's perfectly fine. If you need to poke out that corner even more, then put your hand into the hole of your lining and just work on poking out that corner. Do the same on the other side. There you go. All right, once you have all of the exterior pushed out, now let's go into the lining side that doesn't have the hole and just really push the lining into the edges. There we go. Look how cute this is looking. Isn't that crazy? Look at that. All right, now pull out the lining that has the hole And since we pressed it when it was wrong sides out, this should be pretty easy. You should be able to just tug at the corners of your seam and it just folds right together. So just add a few clips here to hold it together. And now let's take this to the sewing machine and we're just gonna top stitch along this opening at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So check out this adorable little bag. Oh my goodness. Okay, so now all we have to do is build the crossbody strap and we are done. So let's bust that out. So I'm doing the thinner crossbody strap. So I have my piece L, and like I said, I'm using waterproof canvas here because it's quickest and easiest. If you're using quilt cotton, make sure you have it interfaced. If you don't have a long enough piece of fabric, that's perfectly fine. You can just attach two together to make it longer. I have both of my swivel hooks, a slider, and some rivets. So the first thing we want to do is go along the entire length of our strap and mark the midpoint line. If you're using quilt cotton, you can just fold this in half and press. You can do it with waterproof canvas as well, but it doesn't hold a press that easily. So I find marking it is just fine. So I'm gonna mark this on the wrong side of my strap using a fabric marker. I'm just marking 1.5 inches in along the center lengthwise. Once you have that midpoint line marked, you can take the parallel long edges and fold them up wrong sides together to meet that midpoint line. You can press here or use clips to hold this fold. Once you have one side folded down, go ahead and repeat for the other side. And once you have those long edges clipped, let's fold in the short edges as well. So unclip the short edges, and I just fold it in anywhere between 3/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. So fold in those short edges, wrong sides in, and then refold along that long edge, just like that. So you can see the short raw edges are now hidden in the strap. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. And then you can take the entire unit and fold up those folded edges to meet so that all raw edges are now hidden inside the strap. Your strap should now be 3/4 of an inch wide and about 50 inches long. Once you have your strap completely clipped, we're just going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have this top stitched, all we have to do is add the hardware. So take one end of your strap and take your slider. Insert your strap from the bottom of the slider on one edge. Pull it up. And then push the slider over so that you can then take that same strap edge and insert it through the top down. So I'm going to pull it out about 1 inch. Can adjust this however you'd like. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my zipper foot on my sewing machine and I'm going to sew as close as I can to this middle bar on my slider. I'm going to leave the edge unsewn because I'm going to take a rivet and add a rivet here to hold it in place. If you're not using rivets, you're going to want to sew a rectangle over your top stitching just to hold this strap down. So now I'm going to grab my rivet press again and I'm inserting the hole punch die. And I'm just going to punch a hole right here in the center of this rectangle of stitching. And that's where I'm going to put my rivet. So I'm not even going to mark it. I'm just going to eyeball it with my rivet press. There we go. Now I'm going to grab one of my rivets and just insert it into that hole. Snap it down. Now I'm going to change out my die so that I have my 10mm rivet die. And then I just have to push down on this rivet. And there we go, a beautiful little rivet to help hold this in place. Now take your strap and hold it wrong side up. So the bottom edge of your strap by the slider up. Grab one of your swivel hooks and lay it swivel side down. Keep your strap nice and straight and grab the opposite edge of your strap. Insert this edge of the strap up through the bottom by the wrong side of your slider. So just push it up like that. Give yourself a good amount of slack. And now go over that middle section of your slider and push it from the top down, just like that. So now you should have your swivel pointing out on one edge, your slider right side up in the middle, and then your raw edge over here. Grab your remaining swivel and insert this swivel side up, and then fold that edge around so that the short folded edge is along the wrong side of your strap. You can fold this down so you have about an inch or so here. And now just like I did with the slider, I'm going to sew right next to my swivel hook using my zipper foot, and then I'm going to attach a rivet to hold down the tail of this strap. All right, this might be the cutest one I've made yet. Oh my goodness, this is so, I am loving this center embellishment. I am just loving everything about this bag. I'm loving the little Donald is peeking out around the strap. All right, so here's our crossbody strap. Let's go ahead and add that on. Yeah, this is so cute. Look at that. This would be such a great gift. I feel like every time we make something, it's like, can you imagine the kids in our life who would love something like this? But because it's a miniature size, I especially think this would be great for kids, for teenagers, for any of us who just have to run around with a couple things. Hold on, let me get my phone and see if my phone fits in this. Okay, so here's my phone. I have like the big iPhone, whatever. It's a big iPhone. So I'm just going to open this up, plop it in there. Oh yeah, that fits perfectly. So you can put your phone in here, a couple basics. Man, this is an amazing bag. I love it. And then we have that super cool detail, how it's like two pouches together. It really is not that challenging to put together. It doesn't take a ton of time. It doesn't take a ton of material. Again, this is one of those awesome patterns where if you have a fabric you just really want to show off, or especially if you just have like a piece of a fabric, like the print I used today has a lot of great pieces to it. So I could have cut out any of those and put that as my center design here and really featured that as the bag. I am super excited about this bag. Just like with so many of the tutorials, I want to go make a dozen more of these. If only I didn't need to sleep, then I could. I have a little friend here who wants to play, so he's gonna come be part of the outro with us. So I hope that this inspires you to go and try out the double clutch from Spencer Ogg. You will not regret doing this bag. You will not regret making this. The only regret you might have is that other people in your life will like it so much that you might be kind of suckered into making a bunch more for everybody else. So if anybody asks, you bought it. I hope that you're having a great day. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye. Do you want to say bye? Can you say bye? Say bye. You just want to play? Okay, let's go play.